Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's go ahead and get the webinar underway. My name is Dorothy Spears-Dean. I'm the Public Safety Communications Coordinator, and I would like to talk to you this afternoon about the 911 Comprehensive Plan. I'm being joined in this webinar by my colleague, Mr. Joe Sewash. He is the VGIN Coordinator, and he is going to be talking to you about VGIN's strategic plan. The first part of the webinar is going to focus on the 911 Comprehensive Plan. And what I'd like to accomplish during my portion of the webinar is to give you some background information on how the plan was created, to share with you the vision statement for the document, to discuss the goals for the 911 Comprehensive Plan, and then talk about how the requirements were developed and the strategic initiatives, give everybody an idea of where we are right now in terms of task development, and share with you before concluding how we plan to implement the 911 Comprehensive Plan and the next steps in the planning process. So the purpose of the plan is to define the key strategic initiatives to improve 911 service delivery and functionality in the Commonwealth over the next 3 years. The planning cycle for this next iteration of the 911 Comprehensive Plan is from 2020 to 2022. We are using a shorter planning cycle for the 911 Comprehensive Plan because things are changing quite quickly in the 911 industry, and we want to make sure that we have time to address the changes that next generation 911 will bring about. And we thought a shorter time period would enable us to better address the data and information needs that stakeholders would have before that actual consumption period begins. So we're timing the life cycle of the 911 Comprehensive Plan to coincide with the implementation of next generation 911. Although the plan does address next generation 911, the overall focus of the plan is on the entire ecosystem. So under the discussion items related to requirements and strategic initiatives, you will see items that do relate directly to NG 911, but hopefully you'll also see topics that are broader in nature and are more reflective of the 911 ecosystem. My goal, as well as my colleague's goal, was to create a one-page actionable document. We wanted to be committed to providing a resource that was not only readily available, but really summarized what was important from all of the noise that goes on around us throughout our busy professional lives, to make sure that the 911 Comprehensive Plan has the additional information that's needed to support what we're trying to do as far as a planning perspective, I'm going to be developing a story map as a visual companion. This is similar to the approach that we took with the 911, actually the annual report for fiscal year 2019. The board approved the annual report at their September meeting and endorsed the concept of a story map to be a visual companion to that report. It's an opportunity for us to provide more information on the planning process, and it'll be an ongoing story map. So as we are moving through the implementation process and working on various tasks, there'll be updates to the story map. There will also be, similar to our NG 911 dashboard, we'll be creating a dashboard as a companion to the 911 comprehensive plan to be able to transmit and have readily available vital planning information. In years past, we have used outside resources to develop planning documents with both the 911 and the GIS plans. We are completing both using internal ISD resources. This next slide captures the vision statement for the plan. In Virginia, 911 personnel, resources, and systems provide the public using any communications device or method and in any language with rapid, reliable, and accurate emergency services. This is a similar statement to what was in our last plan. The statement was broadened a bit in terms of extending the communication medium from a device or a method, as well as the last statement says accurate emergency services. And as I'm going through the presentation on the 911 comprehensive plan, if anyone has any questions, please, I didn't include a specific slide as an opportunity for participants to ask questions, but you're more than welcome to stop me if you do have a question that comes up on a particular slide, because if you're thinking it, there's probably somebody else that is thinking that as well. You also can send a chat message and we'll go ahead and be monitoring the chat window, and if there's a question there, we'll go ahead and stop and answer it. So we talked about the vision statement. The 911 comprehensive plan will have two overarching goals. The first goal should be fairly obvious to everyone, and that is to complete the NG 911 migration process by the end of calendar year 2021, based on the schedule adopted by the 911 Services Board. And at the last board meeting on November the 14th, the overall deadline that was established of 2021 to complete the deployment process remains intact. What we have done is compress the deployment schedule to take place during calendar years 2020 and 2021. And the second goal is what we have said since the deployment document, the deployment plan was approved in January 2018, that our focus is on full I3 component deployment. So what I'd like to do now is transition to the requirements and the strategic initiatives. To get a sense of where we were in terms of baseline requirements, earlier this year, between April and June, we conducted town hall meetings. We did the town hall meetings for both the 911 comprehensive plan and the VGIN strategic plan jointly. The relationship that exists between 911 and GIS is has only increased in terms of next generation 911. Many of you are working on preparing your GIS data for NG 911, so you understand the critical role that GIS plays in 911 historically and certainly now as we progress to NG 911. So this seems like a great opportunity for us to expand the collaborative relationship we have between the 911 and GIS silos within the Integrated Services Program, so we conducted joint meetings. With the 911 comprehensive plan, I used the standards document that we have for PSAT capabilities and services as the framework to facilitate discussion. So as we work through the various sections of the standards document, which these are the sections of that document, 911 and operations, professional development, technical systems, data development, maintenance and support, and then the last category, analysis and planning. So we have some interrogative questions that help to assess where folks are based on the descriptions of these capabilities and services in the standards document. And there are a number of standard capabilities and services that all Virginia PSAPs must provide. However, it's up to each PSAP to determine how they will meet the standard based on the individual operational aspects of the PSAP, management, and or governance. But we did want to have a way of comparing the feedback and comments we received from one PSAP to another, so that standard document proved to be the best way to go about doing it. There's a little bit of background noise, so I would ask all of our participants to mute your line. So after the discussions took place in the town hall meetings, I spent the summer months looking at the comments that we received, evaluating the requirements for targeted gaps, any needed technology or resources, operational impact, and any funding or legislative change. So what I did based on that feedback is to work on developing statewide requirements, and I used the same group. I grouped them using the same categories that were included in the capabilities and services standard document. So those 5 areas I just went over are the same requirement categories that we're using in this current 911 comprehensive plan. So this next slide here is a summary of the feedback received in the town hall meetings. It's organized into, as I said, the same silos from our standards document, or the same categories. So as you look through each of these columns, going from 911 and operations to professional development, technical systems, data development, maintenance and support, and analysis and planning, when you recall your feedback or your experience in the town hall meetings that you attended, hopefully you see some of the same comments captured here as was shared during these meetings. What I wanted to make sure is that we were not only, as I said, capturing those items that were important for next generation 911, since that's our most immediate need, but we wanted to also make sure that we were addressing broader items related to the 911 ecosystem. And from those requirements, I moved on to developing the strategic initiatives. And the 4 strategic initiatives are listed here. You'll see assess the impact of NG911 on existing statewide 911 capabilities and services, improve accessibility to 911 services and availability of information about the 911 ecosystem, training recommendations for the NG911 telecommunicator, and employee analytics to identify future information services. These strategic initiatives are very holistic. They're also designed to be completed in a certain time frame, in sequential order, moving from the left to the right. So the first critical strategic initiative, and one that's probably the most time-consuming and the heaviest lift, will be to assess the impact of next generation 911. So going back to that standards document that was created in a legacy environment to see what may have changed as far as the impact of next generation 911. So looking at all of those, the categories, going from 911 and operations all the way through analysis and planning. I would anticipate that that would take about 6 months to complete. We are still in the drafting stage of the comprehensive plan. We did share our approach with the 911 Services Board at their November 14th meeting. There was consensus from the board in terms of the approach and the implementation strategy. So the same information that I'm sharing with you now has already been vetted with the 911 Services Board. So after that heavy lift of refreshing our existing 911 standards document, we would move on to access and availability. That could be worked at the same time that we're working on the next generation 911 telecommunicator. So next summer, looking at starting those 2 strategic initiatives and completing them by the end of calendar year 2020. Where I hope we are and where we end up is being able to kick off the Future Information Services Strategic Initiative about the same time next year. And then the planning. Just a quick housekeeping item. For those of you who are participating on the webinar, if you could mute your lines, we would appreciate it. Thank you. So the last strategic initiative, Future Information Services, and that would set us up for beginning the next planning cycle for the next edition of the 911 Comprehensive Plan. The idea is that we would reevaluate the standards document for the impact of next generation 911, broaden that to assessing access and availability of services, both from an internal perspective within the community and then externally with the public, focusing on the next generation 911 telecommunicator. We heard in all of the town hall meetings the critical need of recruitment and retention. This was pointed out at our last board meeting by one of our board members to make sure that we are focusing on professional development. That's so critical to making sure that we have competent, capable people to staff our 911 centers. And then the Future Information Services is where are we now that we have an IT infrastructure in place? What data are we going to need to consume? And what information services will the state need to provide in order for our 911 centers to be successful and be able to serve their citizens? A couple of days ago, I had an opportunity to sit down with some of our public safety communication staff members to talk about some of the supporting tasks for the initiative. And what we tried to do basically was have a brainstorming session. I'm going to talk about the implementation strategy for the 911 Comprehensive Plan in just a few moments. But before we can have a discussion on the implementation and bring folks together to talk about how to implement the plan, it's critical to have something for individuals to react to. So that was really the purpose of this brainstorming session. So in looking at how we would impact or how we would evaluate the impact of NG 911 on current PSAP services and capabilities, there were several items that bubbled up in our discussion in terms of things that we need to focus on. We talked about the fact that this standards document was created in a legacy environment. Have we brought any new stakeholders into the fold with NG 911? Do we need to make sure that the tent is big enough to address all of the stakeholders? And one of our guiding principles is to do no harm. And one of the things that we need to make sure in terms of moving from a legacy world to an NG 911 infrastructure is, in fact, that we have done no harm. Focusing also on the efficiency of technical systems. One of our board members at the last meeting has suggested that we make sure that there's adequate funding, that we are leveraging shared services, and there is a funding committee that has looked at how to facilitate shared services to better able to address the needs of PSAPs and to provide additional resources where needed, data maintenance, and then the cost of 911. So those are some of the ideas that we came up with in terms of items to include in tasks that would support evaluating the impact of next generation 911. And as I said, this initiative needs to be completed first because the outcome of this initiative would be used to support decisions in strategic initiatives 2, 3, and 4. So moving on to those strategic initiatives, accessibility and availability tasks. Accessibility speaks to our citizens and specific groups having access to the 911 system. So the focus here is on the 911 ecosystem. and then the data and information needs of the public, excuse me, and the PSAPs to make sure that if citizens are interested in obtaining information on how 911 services are provided and how 911 is managed in Virginia, that information is available. But also the critical information needs that PSAPs may have in terms of 911, being able to facilitate information sharing. Are there needs to develop or are we able to identify public education opportunities? With the Text to 911 deployment, there were many public education programs going on. The deaf and hard of hearing community have many public education programs. So we want to make sure that we are not neglecting public education as it relates to accessibility and availability. And then the other two items here really speak to how we communicate, we being those that are part of the industry and part of the 911 community here in Virginia, having a standardized approach to communication and information sharing. Somebody in one of the town hall meetings made the comment about, I really need to be able to figure out what's important from all the noise. So to make sure that when you do have a need to obtain information, you don't have to wade through multiple web pages, you don't have to have a hit or miss approach to trying to find information when you need it. That's one of the reasons why we're moving to providing dashboards for up-to-date information on NG911 deployment and other strategic initiatives. And then as we progress throughout the deployment process, what are the ESINet rules of engagement? How will PSAPs communicate in terms of if they have an issue or a problem? You know, we're going from an environment where we've had a number of local, we have a number of LADAs, and we've maintained 8 or 9 different networks in Virginia in terms of 911 services. We're now moving to a single integrated statewide approach. So how are we going to, how will PSAPs interact in that environment? Moving on to the NG911 telecommunicator task. The discussion that we had centered around perhaps this is an opportunity to revise 911 training standards. Can we leverage national guidelines? Can we look at trying to develop a certification or help facilitate certifications? And, you know, can we help other organizations identify champions and their an associated legislative agenda? One of the topics that came up quite frequently at the town hall meetings was certainly professional development, but how do we go about addressing that? And the branding of the 911 profession. And this last comment I have here, the fourth side of the house, refers to a comment that came from the public at our last board meeting, talking about fire, police, and EMS being well-recognized law enforcement brands. Do we need to, I would say we do have a need to brand the 911 profession, but how do we go about doing that? And lastly, to help decision makers understand the expectations and outcome of NG911, and that there is a cost of doing nothing. If you don't care and feed your professional staff, it's going to make your job harder in terms of maintaining PSAP operations into the future. And then the last area we focused on in terms of brainstorming was around information systems. And the first bullet relates to additional statewide data priorities, and this centers around data for call, caller, and location. The last Regional Advisory Council had taken up a potential deliverable, being able to put together a white paper on additional data, and this takes it to a much broader undertaking. But again, what are our statewide, or what will be our statewide data priorities as we move forward with NG911? And then lastly, to identify information services needs. And this process will take us from whom do you receive data and to whom do you need to send it, to make sure that we are looking at the consumption of data and the development of information services holistically. And this brings us to the discussion now on how are we going to implement the 911 Comprehensive Plan. And we are going to be doing that with the help of the Regional Advisory Council. The third charter for the Regional Advisory Council began on July 1st, 2019, and will run through June 30th, 2021. So the same requirement configuration on this slide you already saw early on in the presentation, but it's color-coded here because what I'm proposing in terms of implementing the 911 Comprehensive Plan is to leverage the Regional Advisory Council. So moving on to the next slide, what we're proposing is to create a work group for each of those core services area. So there'll be a 911 and operations work group, there'll be a professional development work group, there will be a technical systems work group, data development, maintenance support, and analysis and planning work groups. And then the symbol in the, or the shape in the upper center, the Public Safety Communication Division and the Regional Advisory Council. So that will be the center, and then the spokes will be those work groups helping to work through the tasks. Now, we haven't had an opportunity yet to jump into this with the Regional Advisory Council, mainly because the board will not be voting on the 911 Comprehensive Plan until their January 9th meeting. So this is putting together all of the preliminary work that needs to go on to make sure that we have everything in place. So hopefully the board will endorse the plan and vote to accept it at their January 9th meeting, and we'll be able to hit the ground running. So the purpose of today's call was to be able to brief the community where we are with the 911 Comprehensive Plan. I'll be doing this once again on another webinar on the 17th of this month. In the meantime, I'll be working on a story map and a dashboard. I've already mentioned when the board will be voting on the plan, and then we'll be setting up a Regional Advisory Council planning meeting sometime middle to late January to hit the ground and start working on that first strategic initiative to assess the impact of next generation 911. And I've been talking for 25 minutes now. Hopefully somebody has a question, but in case I don't have any questions, but you want to email me or contact me, here is my contact information. Thank you, everyone, for your time and your attention. I'm going to go ahead and turn the webinar over to my colleague, Mr. Joe Sewash.
Thank you, Dorothy. Much of what Dorothy has covered in terms of some of the background applies equally to the GIS community and also ISP's goals and initiatives. So as a recap and a level set, we do look for this GIS strategic plan to cover a 3-year time frame to stay in step with the 911 comprehensive plan. It's also obviously ISP's biggest obligation and requirements, so we want to make sure that that we take full advantage of being able to work collaboratively across the 911 and GIS communities. We are looking in the GIS strategic plan refresh to focus on enterprise engagement at all levels, much towards the comments from Dorothy earlier that we want this to be dynamic, transparent, and making sure that, particularly on the GIS side, that the VGIN staff and ISP across the board can demonstrate that your requirements and your priorities are what VGIN and the GIS community is focused on going forward. So this continuum of enterprise engagement, we want to make sure that the activities that we identify for locality GIS and other communities such as state agencies, the private sector, academia, and citizens, has application across all levels of GIS proficiency. We've got a lot of fantastic examples of GIS relevance in the largest localities as well as the smallest localities, and we want to make sure that as we identify priorities and activities over the next 3 years, that we recognize that continuum of resources and proficiency to be a reality check on helping identify what we're going to be working on. We've also talked through the town hall meetings and through meetings across the stakeholder communities that we do not want this process or the outcomes of the process, the actual implementation, to end up as prescriptive. So we want to be engaged with the stakeholder communities, and we also want the stakeholder communities to understand that we value your time and your participation, so the directions and work products and pieces of the implementation side of things actually end up being a value and help you do your work on a day-to-day basis even better. We are committed to focusing on this idea and context of supported facilitation. It's not the folks in the tall building in Richmond making decrees or reading the leaves, so to speak, on behalf of the entire GIS community. We really want to make this plan and this process over the next 3 years a commitment to engagement and transparency. We also want to make sure that, again, your feedback, your input becomes what we focus on, and we can demonstrate that on an ongoing basis back to the community as ISP being responsive to the needs and what's articulated from the stakeholder community. The engagement model that we've identified includes the ISP folks in the middle of this diagram. We have the VGIN Advisory Board, and both ISP as part of VITA, as well as specific Code of Virginia references to VGIN's responsibilities and requirements, as well as the advisory board are referenced here. The new pieces that we will be developing are a group for state agency GIS managers, as well as locality managers. And that would be an instance where we can provide facilitation, but really that will depend on the interaction and engagement of those particular communities to give their feedback on direction. So what is important to their GIS operations and implementation, and how can VGIN support that across the broadest GIS community. Similar to the 911 comprehensive plan, the GIS strategic plan has been drafted as initially as a one-page document. You can see the 4 categories here of policy and strategy, engagement, collaboration, and communication. Those are, again, feedback from both the town hall meetings as well as state agency user groups and in interaction with a broader community. This is reflective of the feedback from these groups and compressing that into 2/3 of a page here. We've had vetting and feedback from the VGIN Advisory Board at their meeting on November 13th, and invite feedback on this document through December, and as we prepare for the VGIN Advisory Board meeting in January to get the plan in place. The strategic initiatives we'll talk about in depth in subsequent slides. So to advance forward, for most in the GIS community, you're very aware of the story map concepts. We'll be developing a story map to be a companion, if you will, a living document to support the strategic plan, as well as be a touchstone for additional content and information on the priorities, as well as a reference and dashboard, if you will, for the activities of the 5 identified strategic initiatives. So the strategic initiatives I'll go through in a little more detail. You'll notice that some of the items on the strategic initiative slides are in blue. The others are in green. The blue content is what we're identifying as kickoffs and must-dos for the various stakeholder groups. And the green is pieces of implementation that will occur during the 3-year time frame, but really need to be driven by input from a broader community. We'll be working to confirm membership to the local government managers group over the next couple of weeks here in December. We've had a number of folks volunteer or express interest as part of the town hall meetings and in other venues that ISP is active in, and we'll be reconfirming that availability. We'll be targeting a startup in the January timeframe, and then also a second meeting in February that will help form the context for the future meetings. So confirming membership, identifying the priorities. Right now we're looking at least 2 members of the GIS community from each of the 7 ISP regions. We also recognize that with a caucus of 14, we'll get a lot of qualified folks, a lot of folks hopefully with a lot of experience, good ideas, and ability to participate, but we also want to leave things flexible, that as we identify individual tasks and work items for the local government stakeholder community, that we also have an ability to expand the roster or reach out and include others from a broader subject matter expert pool. So as we get the startup done in the first quarter of 2020, we'll plan on quarterly meetings for March, June, September, and December for the locality managers group. The housekeeping will be done in Q1. We'll look to identify priorities and issues important to the stakeholder community, both that fit within the other 4 strategic initiatives, plus, again, input from the community on something that maybe didn't slot in or something that we need to put underneath this umbrella, so to speak. You can also see the idea and context of local government engagement survey. In the past, VGIN has supported a statewide survey of the local government stakeholder groups. That hasn't happened since, I believe, 2015. So we'd like to revive that, or at least suggesting to revive it at this point, but also making sure that the content in that survey is driven by input from this locality stakeholder management group. The quarterly meetings that were referenced on the previous slide, the VGIN side of ISP is a total of 7 positions, so we need to think about the resourcing of things, showing this in the months highlighted gold for January, April, July, and October. Those are nominally reserved for the VGIN Advisory Board. The green column of months for February, May, August, and November will be for the State Agency Managers Group. And then the blue highlights for March, June, September, and December would be for the Locality Management Group. So that'll help us even out the workflow, but also provide context in terms of updates. So we would envision that as the state agency and the locality manager groups are spun up, that will regularly communicate status and issues and work products back to the advisory board for further dissemination and review. And similarly, as staff to the VGIN board, ISP and mostly myself would provide updates back to the state agency management group and the locality management group. So there'll be opportunities there for sharing ideas, sharing work products, and opportunities to collaborate on issues. Strategic initiative number 2 focuses on data standards and technical issues. There are a number of standards that have been in existence and under development beginning in 2015. Latest revisions were in 2017. Road center lines, address points, and PSAT boundaries are very critical and required for next generation 911 geospatial call routing. We would also look to update the content of these data standards to reflect other needs for the state agency and locality stakeholder communities for their applications, and the aggregation process of turning these into statewide assets can also play a role into this process. The remaining 2 bullets that we've identified at this point are recommendations, if you will. There have been previously nascent efforts to deliver or develop a community standard for parcels, for elevation, for hydrography. Those didn't completely form into standards and would look for feedback from the community over whether or not we need to focus time and resources onto these, and what the context of creating those and integrating them with the existing standards would be. Are there additional themes within the standards development area or other data models for engagement in the context of data governance and data architecture, also data analytics? How does GIS play into that role on the technical side is something that we can offer support, but again, looking to the stakeholder community to gauge the level of reality and prioritization both within the strategic initiative and across all of the potential activities of the management groups. Also, we've listed here as a placeholder or some place to pin the item, so to speak, is the National Spatial Reference System. This is being developed by the National Geodetic Survey and will be a replacement or a supersede scenario for potentially items such as state plane coordinates, WGS, and others. So this is going to be a topic that is currently evolving as NGS moves towards 2022. The VGIN board and VGIN staff have been engaged with the Virginia Association of Surveyors to also track the issue at the national level and bring the appropriate training and awareness to our respective communities. And that will be increasing in importance through the time frame of this strategiip plan. Strategic initiative number 3 is value-based best practices, helping GIS practitioners and managers become more engaged and good citizens, so to speak, within your respective enterprise and towards a larger enterprise. GIS Technology Roadmap is what you can think of as the strategic development and direction for your GIS implementation. So how does your enterprise GIS support existing business systems and current applications? How do you adapt to new applications, new data requirements, new platforms? Cloud is certainly only going to increase in prevalence moving forward, and making sure that we can facilitate that communication and knowledge sharing across the statewide community. Looking at staff readiness as you identify directions for different platforms, different production and application models, different modes of GIS data set maintenance. What are the requirements to adapt and make sure that your staff maintains their awareness and training? So that can all mix together. And then finally, working better with your traditional IT communities and security communities, again, with cloud platform, integrating GIS into other business lines, having good rapport and a shared understanding of issues that are important to the GIS stakeholder community as well as the traditional IT and security stakeholder communities will help ease that awareness, working together as a single enterprise, and also taking advantage of, for instance, if a particular locality in Tidewater or Northern Virginia has had good experiences, we can use this kind of network and facilitation to be able to template that and demonstrate and disseminate the benefits to the broader community. The proposed or suggested items, again, from input from the town hall meetings and other forums, is looking at business outcome metrics. So if a management side, whether that's an IT manager, a county manager, a board of supervisor, asks what is the value of GIS within our entity, making sure that we can connect the items and the technical work and the strategic work that you do on a day-to-day basis translates to the business side of the house. So you can identify who's using your data within the enterprise, how does this help with efficiency of business processes, perhaps cost avoidance or cost savings in being able to use the GIS investments, and really be able to quantify that relative to what the alternative would be if your business lines didn't have the GIS community to draw on for support. Strategic initiative number 4 is really the linchpin of how does GIS integrate and support the broader 911 community. Through ISP, you've been very engaged over the past couple of years in our data report cards and the process to develop the provisioning and PSAP boundaries. You've heard a lot about the matching metrics for alley to AP, alley to road centerline matches, as well as the critical errors or the must fixes to be prepared for next generation 911 deployment to use geospatial call routing. As we've advised folks, that's not really a finish line, that's simply the next milestone. So there will be the necessity to keep those data sets up to date, both in a temporal context as well as an accuracy context through time. And there will be significant consequences in the context of as the 911 community relies on the GIS data, that ISP can support the localities in that data maintenance process. A number of the activities identified in the initiatives in the 911 comprehensive plan do have varying levels of engagement for the GIS community, and we would look for this initiative within the local government managers group to be that point of contact and point of support to be the nexus for how GIS support directly impacts items related to the 911 community for analytics, data maintenance, et cetera. In the process that we did through the town hall meetings, webinars like this, webinars previously from ISP, we want to continue to build on the cultural awareness between locality GIS operations and their PSAP counterparts. We had an excellent piece of input from one of our town halls suggesting the development of take your PSAP friend to work sort of script, and a counterpart of take your GIS friend to work day for the PSAP community to increase awareness, engagement, and an understanding across the communities of how the other side functions and how the other side necessitates the engagement and use of the resources. Strategic initiative number 5 is focused on enterprise engagement and communication. We want the local government GIS stakeholders to be able to share their knowledge and success both on the management side as well as the technical side. We also want to make sure that we facilitate and encourage engagement across the stakeholder communities so that, for instance, those from the localities that attended the town hall meetings, one of the questions that we discussed was what value does a locality perceive or receive for contributing their data to the ISP data calls twice per year. We want to be able to show tangible results and look at innovative ways that localities can generate and articulate what they get back in return for that contribution. Also, that can be a connection point, if you will, to connect with state agencies to see if information, data, knowledge that they are creating as a result of this shared data resource and maintenance from the localities can result in additional data resources being tied and linked back and made available to the localities. We want to also be able to find value by aligning the business goals and directions, basically the outcomes of these proposed GIS roadmaps in being able to provide support and integration within a broader local enterprise. We certainly want to, again, prioritize that correctly based on feedback from the localities, but also be able to support that and facilitate that in the development of work products, templates, anecdotes, an online library, if you will, of these kinds of benefits. And then finally, engagement with IT management. At the end of the day, GIS is transitioning away from being its own sandbox to being a corporate citizen within a larger IT environment, and making sure that localities can, number one, be equipped with the knowledge and experience that they need, but also the shared benefits and benefits of communities that have already navigated this path, so to speak, to be able to share that within the larger community. The next steps for the GIS Strategic Plan basically mirror what Dorothy has presented earlier for the 911 community. Dorothy and I will be hosting another webinar on December 17th to the locality community. I'll also be doing webinars for the state agency community and academic community in between on the 5th and 11th, respectively. We'll also be integrating feedback from today's comments as well as throughout the rest of the month. The story map is already in development, so that will also be distributed. We'll be setting up for the beginning the locality GIS manager meetings beginning in January for confirming membership. If anybody on this call has interest or would like to talk more, please reach out to me if you have an interest in either being a seated member or simply engaged in future activities. And then we'll have this wrapped up through the holiday season and ready for the VGIN Advisory Board to review and provide their feedback at the scheduled meeting for January 7th. So with that, we have a few minutes left for any feedbacks or questions. I do not see any questions in the chat window, so we can take a couple of moments now if you do have questions or feedback. Okay, I've included my contact information here. We certainly welcome any feedback or comments. Again, if you are interested in participating in the state managers group, or sorry, the locality managers group, please reach out to me. And with that, we will go ahead and close this webinar. We appreciate your attendance. And if you do have feedback on the 911 side, please contact Dorothy Spears-Dean, or on the GIS side, please contact me at this information. Thank you for your attendance.